My husband punched my pregnant sister in the stomach, and thank God he did. My husband walked up to my 8 months pregnant sister during her baby shower and punched her full force in the stomach. She folded in half and crashed backward into the gift table while 50 guests screamed. I shoved him backward, screaming, "What is wrong with you?" while my mom called 911 sobbing about assault on a pregnant woman. My dad and brothers pinned my husband against the wall, and I was hitting his chest, calling him a psychopath while my sister lay on the floor holding her belly and crying that something was wrong. Her boyfriend was checking for blood, and everyone was filming while my grandmother was having chest pains from the shock. My aunts grabbed their kids and ran while I dropped beside my sister trying to feel the baby kick, but she kept pushing my hands away saying, "Don't touch it, hurts too much." The neighbor who was a midwife tried to come help, but my sister curled into a ball screaming not to touch her stomach. My uncle was on the phone with his lawyer saying we needed to press charges for attempted murder of an unborn child, while my sister's mother-in-law fainted and had to be laid on the couch. My sister kept her arms wrapped around her stomach so tight nobody could get close, crying that she could feel something was wrong inside. "Look at her stomach where I hit her," my husband yelled while fighting against the men holding him, and I wanted to kill him until I saw it. A deep dent in my sister's belly that wasn't popping back out. That's memory foam under her dress, not a baby, and I can prove everything she's been doing. I got to my sister before she could stop me and felt around the dent. My hands went numb pressing against foam edges and Velcro straps where my nephew should have been. She's been buying different sized fake bellies online to fake the progression, stealing ultrasound photos from pregnancy forums and photoshopping her name on them, and scamming everyone for $30,000 in medical bills for appointments that never existed because I checked with every OB in the city. I kept pressing on the dented foam while my sister tried to push me away, and everyone started grabbing at her stomach, finding more straps and padding underneath. I followed her after she said she had an OB appointment yesterday, and she went to a bar and drank for 2 hours, then bought 3 more fake bellies at a costume shop downtown. My sister was crying, screaming at him to shut up, but he didn't listen. My grandmother looked like she was about to faint. My husband showed us her laptop from when she'd left it at our house. Search history full of realistic pregnancy bellies, and how to fake morning sickness and pregnancy symptoms by week, and what to say at baby shower. But here's why I had to stop this today, my husband said while struggling against my brother's grip, sweat pouring down his face. "I saw her at the hospital last week following a teenage patient around the maternity ward, and security footage shows she's been going to the teen pregnancy support group pretending to be pregnant for 2 months. Our mother was sobbing while my husband showed us screenshots from the hospital cameras of my sister trailing behind a young pregnant girl who was always alone, sitting next to her in the cafeteria, walking her to her car. She befriended this girl who has no family, found out she's being induced tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., and yesterday bought a car seat and nurse scrubs, and was checking tomorrow's shift schedules to find the window when the nurses change over. My sister had told everyone she was delivering at a birthing center that doesn't exist, planning to disappear tonight and come back tomorrow with a stolen newborn she'd claim was hers. She'd even been practicing forging birth certificates and had bought a breast pump and formula to make feeding the stolen baby look real, plus she'd been taking hormones to induce lactation. The foam belly shifted completely sideways, and my mom ripped my sister's dress up, exposing the entire prosthetic contraption strapped around her waist. Everyone was screaming, and my sister's boyfriend backed away from her while she looked for exits like a trapped animal. My cousin was on the phone with police describing the fraud and planned kidnapping while my aunts calculated how much money they'd given her for fake medical expenses. "You ruined everything!" my sister snarled at my husband, ripping off the fake belly and throwing it at his feet. "That teenager's a drug addict who doesn't deserve a baby, and I would have given it a perfect life." She started for the door, but my dad and brothers blocked her path, forming a wall. I watched my sister's face change into something I'd never seen before in 30 years of knowing her, like watching a mask finally fall off. And none of us were prepared for how far she was willing to go to get what she wanted. She broke free from my dad's grip and lunged straight at my husband with her nails out like claws. My brothers caught her midair and slammed her down onto the living room carpet. She was kicking and screaming that we ruined her perfect plan while the fake belly lay there dented and twisted. My husband kept yelling for everyone to listen about the hospital footage while my sister thrashed on the floor. The police sirens were already getting closer because my cousin had called them 5 minutes ago. My sister's boyfriend stood frozen by the couch, just staring at the foam prosthetic like his brain couldn't process it. 2 police cars pulled up and officers rushed through our front door while my sister tried to crawl toward the back exit. My cousin showed them her phone with all the screenshots my husband had sent of the purchases and hospital security footage. The officers looked at the fake belly on the floor and then at my sister who was still fighting my brothers. They pulled out handcuffs while she screamed that the teenage girl didn't deserve her baby anyway. She kept switching between sobbing about how we betrayed her and threatening what she'd do when she got out. The officers read her rights while dragging her toward the police car as all the neighbors came out to watch. My grandmother was clutching her chest on the couch while my aunts fanned her with napkins from the gift table. The detective who showed up said they needed to contact the hospital immediately about the teenage patient. My husband gave them Becca Torres's name and they called it in right away to get her protection. Within an hour, the hospital had moved her to a secure floor with guards posted outside her room. They got an emergency protection order signed by a judge that same night to keep my sister away. The detective said my sister had been watching this girl for 2 months according to the security footage. But then another officer walked up to my husband and said he was under arrest for assault. Everyone started yelling that he was protecting a baby from being kidnapped, but the officer said assault is assault. My husband put his hands behind his back while I scrambled to find our checkbook for bail money. He spent that whole night in a holding cell while I called every lawyer in our phone book. Nobody wanted to take a case this crazy until I found one who said he'd meet us in the morning. I didn't sleep at all and drove to the courthouse at 6 a.m. with $5,000 cash for bail. The lawyer looked at all the evidence and said my husband definitely saved that baby from being stolen. He thought we could get the charges reduced to a misdemeanor, but my husband would still face some punishment. While we were at the courthouse, house, my sister's boyfriend showed up at our door completely wrecked. He kept asking how long she'd been lying because he'd painted a whole nursery yellow last month. He'd told his entire family they were having a baby and bought a crib that cost $2,000. I showed him the laptop with her search history going back over a year of fake pregnancy research. He threw up in our bathroom when he saw she'd been taking hormones to make her breasts leak milk. My mom called me crying because Channel 7 had already picked up the story about the attempted kidnapping. Our last name was all over the evening news, and she couldn't leave her house without reporters asking questions. The grocery store clerk asked her if she was the mother of the woman who tried to steal a baby. Dad had to take time off work because his coworkers kept staring and whispering in the break room. The detective called and asked me to come with them to search my sister's apartment for more evidence. We found 3 notebooks filled with details about Becca Torres and her daily schedule at the hospital. She'd written down what the girl ate for lunch and which bathroom she used most often. There were photos of Becca walking to her car that my sister had taken from across the parking lot. She'd studied this poor girl for months, like she was planning a military operation or something. The detective found receipts for the nurse scrubs and a fake hospital ID badge she'd ordered online. While we were searching, I found credit card statements with my name on them that I never opened. My sister had used my social security number to open 3 cards and max them all out. She'd done the same thing to our mom for another $20,000 in fraudulent charges. The detective said identity theft charges would be added to everything else she was facing. We had to file police reports and freeze our credit while dealing with everything else falling apart. 3 days later, Becca Torres went into labor and delivered a healthy baby girl at the hospital. Security guards stayed outside her room the whole time, and Lila Baldwin from social services was there too. My sister had been right about one thing, which was that Becca didn't have any family support, but now she had Lila helping her apply for housing assistance and figure out how to be a mom. There's something deeply unsettling about how calculating the sister was with all those notebooks tracking that poor girl's bathroom schedule and lunch choices. Makes me wonder what else she might have been planning that they haven't found yet in her apartment. The baby was perfect and safe, and my sister was sitting in jail where she couldn't hurt anyone. We thought that would be the end of it, but my sister's lawyer said she wanted to go to trial. She was planning to argue that she was doing a public service by taking the baby from an unfit mother. The prosecutor showed up at our house 2 days later with a stack of papers thick as a phone book. She laid out all the charges against my sister one by one on our kitchen table. Attempted kidnapping of a minor's child carried the most time, then fraud, identity theft, and stalking charges added more years. My husband sat across from her with his own smaller stack of papers for his assault charge. Our lawyer kept saying it was the best outcome we could hope for given what my husband did. The prosecutor agreed to reduce it to misdemeanor assault if he pleaded guilty, and accepted whatever punishment the judge gave. My dad called me that night from the emergency room because his chest hurt and he couldn't breathe right. The doctor said it was a minor heart episode brought on by stress and kept him overnight for observation. He kept asking the nurses how he missed all the signs that his daughter could do something this terrible. Mom sat beside his hospital bed crying and holding his hand while machines beeped around them. My sister's ex-boyfriend called me the next morning asking if I could come to their apartment. He'd been packing up her things and found 3 more fake pregnancy bellies in their bedroom closet. They were different sizes labeled 6 months, 7 months, and 8 months in her handwriting. The receipts showed she'd been buying them for over a year, practicing how to wear them right. He showed me videos on her phone of her trying different walks and poses in their bathroom mirror. There were notes about which clothes hid the straps best and how to sit, so the foam looked natural. My grandmother hadn't left her room in 3 days and wouldn't answer when we knocked. Mom finally used her spare key and found her sitting in the dark, staring at nothing. She'd given my sister $5,000 for prenatal vitamins and medical expenses over the past months. The shame of being fooled by her own granddaughter was eating her alive from the inside. Our lawyer called with more bad news about what he'd found digging into my sister's online activity. She'd joined 12 different pregnancy forums under fake names over the past 2 years. Each account had stolen ultrasound photos from real pregnant women that she'd edited with her information. She'd copied other women's pregnancy stories word for word and posted them as her own experiences. The lawyer printed out hundreds of pages showing how she'd studied real pregnancies to make her lie perfect. 2 weeks later, my husband stood in front of the judge and pleaded guilty to misdemeanor assault. The judge looked at all the evidence about why he punched my sister, but said violence is never acceptable. She sentenced him to anger management classes every week for 6 months and 100 hours of community service. My husband nodded and signed the papers without arguing, because he knew he was lucky not to get jail time. I went to the courthouse 3 weeks after that for a hearing about my sister's case. Becca Torres was there too, with her newborn daughter sleeping in a carrier against her chest. She looked so young sitting on that bench, maybe 17 at most, with dark circles under her eyes. When she saw me, she walked over and thanked me for stopping my sister from stealing her baby. Her voice shook when she talked about how scared she was to testify, but she wanted justice. The baby made little noises, and Becca adjusted the blanket around her tiny face with gentle hands. I could see why my sister targeted her, because she was alone with no family in the courtroom. But she had Lila Baldwin now, the social worker assigned to help her figure out being a mom. The psychiatrist's report about my sister came in the mail 2 days before her next hearing. It said she had something called pseudopsoriasis delusion disorder, combined with antisocial behavior patterns. The doctor wrote that my sister genuinely believed she deserved a baby more than unfit mothers. She saw teenage moms and women struggling with addiction as unworthy of their children. The report went on for 20 pages about how her mind justified planning to steal Becca's baby. It made me sick reading how she'd convinced herself she was doing something noble and right. Mom and Dad hired a financial advisor to figure out how much money my sister had stolen from everyone. The total came to almost $50,000 when they added up all the credit card fraud. They started selling things and pulling from their retirement savings to pay family members back. Dad couldn't look anyone in the eye at family dinners and kept apologizing for raising someone who could do this. The shame was destroying him worse than the heart problems, because he felt responsible for not seeing it. 3 weeks after her arrest, my sister sent me a letter from jail written on yellow legal paper. She said I betrayed her and she would never forgive me for ruining her life. The whole letter blamed everyone else for not understanding that Becca didn't deserve her baby. She wrote that teenagers who get pregnant are selfish and irresponsible and don't deserve to be mothers. She said she would have given that baby a perfect life with 2 parents and a nice house. The last line said she was doing the right thing and we were all too stupid to see it. I threw the letter in the trash and tried to forget about it, but 2 days later, my husband had to start his community service at the youth center downtown. The judge made him do 100 hours teaching kids about handling anger, which felt weird since he'd punched my sister. He walked into that first session with 12 middle schoolers staring at him and started telling them our whole story about the baby shower. The kids sat there with their mouths open while he explained how he'd followed my sister and discovered her plan to steal a baby. He showed them how anger can protect people sometimes, but violence always has consequences, even when you're right. One kid asked if he regretted hitting her, and my husband said no about stopping the kidnapping, but yes about using his fists. The program coordinator watched from the back and nodded when my husband talked about finding better ways to handle dangerous situations. After 3 weeks of sessions, the kids started opening up about their own anger problems, and my husband actually got good at helping them. Then Becca called me crying because some guy showed up at her apartment claiming to be her brother. She said his name was Cade, and he'd been gone for 4 years because of drugs, but saw the news story about my sister trying to steal her baby. He stood outside her door with flowers and a stuffed animal for the baby, saying he wanted to make things right. Becca didn't trust him at first, but Lila, the social worker, ran a background check and found out he'd been clean for 2 years. Cade had a job at a warehouse and his own apartment, and kept showing up with diapers and formula until Becca finally let him meet his niece. Meanwhile, our whole family started going to therapy together, except for my sister, who was still in jail. The therapist made us sit in a circle and talk about how we felt betrayed by someone we'd known our whole lives. Mom cried every session about missing the warning signs, and Dad kept blaming himself for raising her wrong. The therapist kept saying we were all victims of my sister's lies and manipulation and shouldn't blame ourselves. She said people with my sister's condition are experts at hiding their true selves and fooling everyone around them. We spent 6 sessions just processing the shock of finding out someone we loved could plan something so evil. Then my sister's ex-boyfriend filed a lawsuit against her for emotional distress and fraud. His lawyer sent us papers showing my sister had been taking hormones to make her breasts leak milk and cause mood swings. She'd spent $8,000 of his money on baby stuff and made him tell his whole family about the pregnancy. He wanted damages for the therapy he needed and the money he'd lost preparing for a fake baby. The lawyer said he had a strong case since my sister admitted in jail phone calls that she'd been faking everything. 2 months after the arrest, I had to go to the courthouse and testify before a grand jury. They made me tell the whole story about the baby shower from the beginning while 23 people stared at me. When I got to the part about feeling the foam belly dent under my hands, I started shaking and had to drink water. The prosecutor showed them photos of the fake belly and the receipts for all the different sizes she'd bought online. I testified for 3 hours about everything I'd seen and heard that day, and how my sister's face changed when we caught her. The grand jury took less than an hour to indict her on all charges, including attempted kidnapping and fraud. Meanwhile, Lila kept working with Becca to get her life together with the new baby. She helped Becca fill out applications for housing assistance and signed her up for job training at the community college. Becca wanted to be a dental assistant, so she could support her daughter without depending on anyone. Lila took her to the WIC office for formula vouchers and helped her apply for childcare assistance so she could attend classes. Cade started watching the baby while Becca went to appointments, and slowly they built trust between them. But things at home got harder because I couldn't stop thinking about my husband hitting my sister. Even though he'd saved that baby, I kept seeing him pull back his fist and punch her stomach. We'd be eating dinner and I'd remember the sound of his fist hitting the foam and feel sick. I'm trying to understand how the sister's mind worked. She actually took hormones to make her body produce milk? That's such a strange mix of planning and delusion. He noticed me flinching when he moved too fast and finally said we needed help. We found a couples counselor who specialized in trauma and started going every week to work through it. The counselor said my brain was stuck between gratitude and horror, which was normal for such a complicated situation. Then the news coverage brought out more victims we didn't know about. 3 different women called the prosecutor saying my sister had stalked them during their pregnancies too. One woman said my sister showed up at her prenatal appointments asking weird questions about the baby's health. Another said my sister followed her to the parking garage after a birthing class and tried to get her phone number. The third woman had screenshots of my sister joining her pregnancy Facebook group under a fake name and asking for her address. My uncle hired his own lawyer to file a civil lawsuit trying to get back the $30,000 my sister stole. The lawyer said criminal restitution would take years, but civil court could move faster if we had good evidence. He started collecting receipts and bank statements from everyone who'd given my sister money for fake medical bills. The total kept growing as more relatives remembered giving her cash for prescriptions and doctor visits that never happened. Then my sister did something nobody expected and fired her public defender. She stood up in court and told the judge she wanted to represent herself because everyone was against her. She said the public defender was part of a conspiracy to make her look crazy when she was actually trying to save a baby. The judge ordered another psychiatric evaluation to figure out if she was competent enough to make that decision. The psychiatrist spent 4 hours with my sister over 2 days and watched every recording from the jail visits we'd made. Mom had her first panic attack at the grocery store 3 weeks later when a woman she didn't know walked up asking if she was the mother from the news story about the fake pregnancy. Mom dropped her basket and ran to the car where she sat shaking for 20 minutes before she could drive home. Dad found her that night sitting in the dark kitchen crying about how she couldn't face people anymore. The doctor prescribed anxiety medication the next day after Mom described waking up at 3 a.m. with her heart racing and feeling like she couldn't breathe. She started taking the pills, but they made her tired all the time, and she stopped stopped going to her book club and yoga class. Meanwhile, Lila Baldwin kept meeting with Becca and her brother Cade, who'd shown up after seeing the news coverage. Cade had been clean for 2 years and worked construction, but wanted to help his sister after missing so much of her life. Lila introduced him to her husband Ramon, who ran a security company and needed reliable workers for overnight shifts at the office buildings. Cade took the job and moved into a small apartment near Becca, so he could watch the baby while she went to appointments. My husband hit the halfway mark of his 100 community service hours and came home talking about this kid named Isaac, who reminded him of himself at that age. The youth center had him teaching basic self-defense, but mostly he just listened to the kids talk about their problems at home. The anger management instructor noticed my husband was different too and started having him help with the newer participants who were still in the angry phase. The second psychiatric evaluation results came back saying my sister was competent to stand trial, but had something called narcissistic personality disorder with antisocial features. The psychiatrist wrote that she understood right from wrong, but believed her desires were more important than other people's rights. She recommended at least 5 years of intensive therapy, whether my sister went to prison or not. Dad went back to work after taking 2 weeks off, but came home early his first day saying he couldn't handle the looks from his coworkers. His boss suggested he take early retirement with full benefits since he'd been there 28 years, and Dad started seriously considering it. That weekend, I was cleaning out the garage and found a box of my sister's stuff from when she'd stayed with us last year. Inside were printed articles about international adoption and babies being sold to wealthy couples for $50,000 or more. There were notes in her handwriting about how to forge adoption papers and which countries had the least oversight. She'd bookmarked stories about people getting caught and highlighted what mistakes they'd made. The prosecutor added it to the evidence file and said it showed premeditation and that the kidnapping could have led to human trafficking. My husband's anger management instructor was this older guy named Frank, who'd been a Marine and then a cop before becoming a counselor. Frank started meeting with my husband one-on-one after the group sessions to talk about the difference between protecting people and attacking them. He made my husband write out what he was feeling in the moment before he punched my sister and what other options he could have chosen. They worked through scenarios where my husband had to practice de-escalation techniques even when he knew someone was doing something wrong. The prosecutor called me 2 months after the arrest to discuss a plea deal they were offering my sister. 15 years with the possibility of parole after 7 if she completed psychiatric treatment and showed genuine remorse. The alternative was going to trial where she could get 25 to life if the jury convicted her on all charges including attempted kidnapping of a minor. Becca got accepted into a GED program for young mothers that included free childcare during classes. The program met 3 nights a week and Saturday mornings at the community college. Cade adjusted his work schedule so he could watch the baby while Becca was in class, and Lila helped them set up a routine. Becca was determined to finish her GED and then start the dental assistant program the following year. The baby was healthy and hitting all her milestones, and Becca sent us a picture of her smiling for the first time. My sister's lawyer presented the plea deal during a video call from jail, but my sister started yelling before he even finished explaining it. She said she wasn't taking any deal because she hadn't done anything wrong, and the jury would understand she was trying to save a baby from an unfit teenage mother. Her lawyer tried to explain that the evidence was overwhelming, but she fired him on the spot and said she'd find someone who actually believed in her case. The judge appointed another public defender, but my sister refused to meet with them and filed paperwork to represent herself again. The guards reported she wasn't taking the medication they'd prescribed for her anxiety and was spending all her time in the law library researching cases where people beat kidnapping charges. She wrote letters to anyone who would listen claiming she was persecuted for trying to help a baby have a better life. The family therapist made us sit in a circle every Tuesday afternoon in her office that smelled like vanilla candles and old books. She pulled out this timeline on a big whiteboard and started marking dates when my sister had lied about things we'd forgotten. There was the time 5 years ago when she said she had cancer, and we all shaved our heads in support until Dad found out she'd never been to the oncologist she named. The therapist kept adding more lies to the board, like when my sister claimed she was accepted to nursing school but was actually working at a gas station. Mom cried through most of these sessions, remembering how my sister would stare at pregnant women in stores and ask to touch their bellies. The therapist said we'd all been in denial about my sister's problems because facing them meant admitting someone we loved was capable of terrible things. My husband finished his last day of community service at the youth center on a Thursday, and the kids threw him a little party with cupcakes they'd made. One boy named Isaac handed him this letter he'd written about how my husband's story helped him understand why he gets so mad sometimes. The letter said Isaac was learning to count to 10 and walk away instead of hitting when he got angry at his stepdad. 3 other kids wrote notes too, and my husband kept them all in his wallet. The youth center director asked if my husband would come back as a volunteer coach for their basketball team. The prosecutor called us into her office downtown, where the walls were covered with law degrees and photos of her kids. She spread out all the case files on this huge conference table and explained the trial would start in 3 months. My sister was planning to represent herself and argue she was performing a public service by targeting what she called an unfit teenage mother. The prosecutor showed us motions my sister had filed claiming Becca was on drugs, even though all the drug tests came back clean. She warned us my sister would try to make herself look like a hero who was saving a baby from neglect. Mom and Dad met with a real estate agent about their vacation home in the mountains where we used to spend every Christmas. They'd bought it 20 years ago and fixed it up themselves, but now they needed the money to pay back everyone my sister had scammed. Uncle got $1,500 back, and my aunts each got their money too. Grandmother refused to take anything, saying she didn't want their money, just wanted them to heal. The house sold in 2 weeks to a young family with 3 kids. I was picking out apples at the grocery store when I heard a baby crying and turned to see Becca pushing a cart with her daughter in the carrier. Cade was with them comparing formula prices on his phone. The baby had these chubby cheeks and was wearing a pink onesie that said "Mommy's Girl" on it. The way they're digging up all these old lies from of 5 years ago makes me wonder if everyone just chose to look the other way back then. That cancer story where they all shaved their heads. How did nobody question that until Dad checked? Becca looked tired with dark circles under her eyes, but she was smiling at her baby and making silly faces to stop the crying. She saw me and froze for a second before Cade put his hand on her shoulder and whispered something. We talked for a few minutes about how the baby was sleeping through the night now, and Becca was taking her GED classes online. The baby grabbed my finger when I reached out and had the strongest grip for someone so small. Letters started arriving at everyone's houses with my sister's jail number as the return address. She wrote to our aunt saying I was jealous of her and had turned my husband against her. She told our cousins that my husband was violent and dangerous, and they should keep their kids away from him. Most of the family threw the letters away or sent them back unopened, but Dad's brother called asking if maybe we had overreacted. Mom had to show him all the evidence again, including the receipts for the fake bellies and the stalking videos. My sister even wrote to our old neighbors saying she was wrongly imprisoned for caring too much about children's welfare. The prosecutor got recordings of my sister's phone calls from jail through a court order. We sat in her office listening to my sister tell another inmate how she was going to get her baby as soon as she got out. She described Becca as a worthless addict who didn't deserve to be a mother, even though Becca had never touched drugs in her life. In one call, my sister said she knew where Becca lived now and would wait as long as it took. The prosecutor said these calls proved my sister was still dangerous and would use them at trial to show she had no remorse. My sister had drawn pictures of babies in her cell that guards found during a search. My husband and I drove around looking at houses in different neighborhoods every weekend for a month. Our house had reporters showing up asking for interviews and people slowing down to take pictures of where the baby shower happened. The neighbors were polite, but we could tell they were uncomfortable around us now. We found a place 40 minutes away in a quiet suburb where nobody knew our names. The moving truck came on a Saturday and we packed everything while trying not to look at the backyard where the gift table used to be. Grandmother finally agreed to give a statement to the prosecutor after staying silent for months. She was too weak to come to court, so they set up a video call from her living room. She sat in her favorite chair wearing her good dress and told the prosecutor about giving my sister $5,000 for prenatal vitamins and maternity clothes. Her hands shook as she showed bank statements and canceled checks. She said my sister had come to her house crying about medical bills and needing help to give her baby the best start in life. When the prosecutor asked if she wanted the money back, grandmother said she just wanted my sister to get help and never hurt another family. Becca brought her baby to the prosecutor's office for a meeting about the trial, and I was there too. The baby was 6 months old and could sit up by herself and was starting to eat mashed bananas and sweet potatoes. Lila came with them and told us Becca hadn't missed a single parenting class or pediatrician appointment. The baby was in the perfect weight range and had rolled over early and was already trying to crawl. Lila said in her 20 years as a social worker, she'd rarely seen such a devoted young mother. Becca was studying for her GED test every night after the baby went to sleep, and Cade was working overtime to pay for daycare. The prosecutor took pictures of the healthy, happy baby to show the jury what my sister had tried to steal. 3 months later, I walked into the courthouse for jury selection and saw my sister for the first time since her arrest. She'd lost at least 30 pounds, and her cheekbones stuck out sharp under pale skin that looked like paper. The orange jumpsuit hung loose on her frame, and her hair was flat against her head instead of the perfect curls she always had. She kept telling her lawyer she didn't need to be there, and the judge made her sit down 4 times before threatening to have her gagged. The prosecutor asked potential jurors if they could be fair to someone accused of planning to kidnap a baby. My sister kept shaking her head and mouthing the word no every time someone said they could be impartial. We picked 12 jurors and 2 alternates by lunch, and my sister told the judge they were all stupid. The next morning, opening statements started, and my sister interrupted the prosecutor 6 times in the first 10 minutes. She stood up saying the prosecutor didn't understand that she was helping society by taking a baby from an unfit mother. The judge warned her twice, then said one more outburst would mean contempt charges and removal from the courtroom. My sister sat back down but kept making faces and shaking her head while the prosecutor showed the jury photos of the fake bellies and the stalking videos. When her lawyer gave his opening statement, my sister kept trying to grab the microphone from him. 2 days later, I took the witness stand at 8 in the morning and didn't leave until after 2 in the afternoon. The prosecutor walked me through finding the foam belly at the baby shower and discovering all the evidence my husband had collected. I described pressing my hands into the dented foam where my nephew should have been and hearing my sister admit she thought the teenager didn't deserve her baby. My sister stared at me the entire 6 hours without blinking or looking away once. Her lawyer asked me if I'd ever seen signs of mental illness before, and I had to say no, even though looking back there were probably things we missed. The prosecutor showed the jury the receipts for the fake bellies and the screenshots of my sister following Becca at the hospital. I identified my sister's handwriting on the notes about Becca's schedule and confirmed the credit card she'd opened in my name. When I finally stepped down, my legs were shaking so bad I almost fell. The next morning, Becca took the stand holding her baby who was almost 9 months old now. She described meeting my sister at the teen pregnancy support group and how my sister always sat next to her and asked personal questions. Becca's voice broke when she talked about finding out someone was planning to steal her baby the day she gave birth. She said she hadn't slept right for months and still checked the locks 5 times before bed. 3 jurors were wiping their eyes when Becca described being 17 and alone and thinking my sister was being kind when really she was hunting her. The baby started crying during the testimony, and Becca bounced her while explaining how my sister had found out her induction date and work schedule. My sister's lawyer didn't cross-examine Becca at all, which made my sister slam her hands on the table. My husband testified the next afternoon about following my sister to the bar when she was supposed to be at a doctor appointment. He admitted punching her was wrong and he'd already completed his community service and anger management for it, but he explained he couldn't let an innocent baby get stolen, and he knew the police wouldn't believe him without proof. He showed the jury the security footage he'd saved of my sister stalking Becca for 2 months. My sister sister's lawyer asked if my husband enjoyed hitting a woman, and my husband said no, but he'd do it again to save a baby. The jury deliberated for only 3 hours, which our lawyer said was really fast for a case this serious. They came back with guilty verdicts on all 7 counts, including conspiracy to commit kidnapping and fraud over $10,000. My sister jumped up screaming that they were all idiots who didn't understand she was trying to help that baby have a better life. The bailiffs had to drag her out while she kept yelling about how Becca was trash who would ruin her child. 2 weeks later at sentencing, the judge gave my sister 18 years with the possibility of parole in 10 if she completed psychiatric treatment. My sister laughed and said she'd rather do the full 18 than pretend she was wrong. The judge said that was her choice, but she'd be transferred to a psychiatric correctional facility regardless. Within a month, my sister was moved to a facility 3 hours away where she had to attend daily therapy sessions. The doctors called us after her evaluation and said her personality disorder was severe and would take years of intensive treatment to even begin addressing. They said she still believed she'd done nothing wrong and talked about Becca's baby like it belonged to her. Mom and Dad started going to a grandparent support group at the community center for families affected by crime. Dad said it helped to hear other people's stories about their kids doing terrible things and how they learned to live with the shame. Mom became a regular speaker after 6 months, telling new members that loving your child doesn't mean excusing their crimes. They even started a fund to help young mothers like Becca afford childcare and baby supplies. My husband got hired coaching youth baseball and soccer at the rec center, using his experience from anger management to teach kids about controlling their emotions. He'd tell them about consequences and making better choices without giving specifics about what happened with my sister. The kids loved him because he understood getting mad, but taught them how to handle it without hurting anyone. 1 year passed, and we all drove to the community college for Becca's graduation ceremony, where she walked across the stage in her cap and gown. Cade held the baby up so she could see her mom getting her diploma, while Lila and Ramon cheered from the seats next to us. The dean announced Becca got accepted into the social work program starting in the fall, and she pumped her fist in the air. How did Becca manage to study for her GED with a baby crying at night? The way she balanced school and being a mom while dealing with trauma from someone trying to steal her baby makes me wonder what kept her going every single day. After the ceremony, Becca showed us her acceptance letter and class schedule while her daughter grabbed at the tassel on her cap. My husband and I looked at each other during the celebration and both knew we were finally ready to try for our own baby after all the therapy sessions. We'd spent months working through what happened and learning how to trust again and handle conflict without violence. That weekend, Dad sat at his desk for 6 hours writing and rewriting a letter to my sister in the psychiatric facility. He showed Mom the final version where he said he loved her but couldn't have contact until she took responsibility for what she did. His hands shook when he sealed the envelope, and Mom drove him to the post office because he couldn't see through his tears. The extended family started having small dinners again, but half the relatives still wouldn't come after everything that happened. Uncle hosted Thanksgiving with just 12 people instead of the usual 40, but everyone actually talked instead of pretending. My cousin brought her new boyfriend, and nobody asked about my sister, which made the whole meal easier. 3 years into her sentence, the facility called to say my sister finally started participating in group therapy sessions. The doctor said she admitted for the first time that she needed help, and it was the first real progress they'd seen. She still wouldn't apologize or say she was wrong, but at least she stopped insisting Becca didn't deserve her baby. Meanwhile, Becca finished her first year of social work classes while working part-time at the women's shelter downtown. She started leading support groups for teen moms using her own story to help them see they could make it too. Her supervisor wrote a letter saying Becca was the best peer counselor they'd ever had because she really understood what the girls were going through. My husband and I found out I was pregnant right after Becca started her second year of college. We picked the name Hope before we even knew it was a girl because we needed something positive after everything dark. When she was born, the nurse asked about filling out the birth announcement for the newspaper, and we said no thanks. People at the grocery store would ask about Hope's aunt when they saw us, and we just said she was getting help she needed. We didn't explain or make excuses or tell the whole story anymore because it wasn't their business. 5 years after that terrible baby shower, our family found its new normal with weekly dinners and monthly game nights. We had security cameras now, and Mom kept the doors locked even during the day, which we never did before. Dad started going to church again and found peace in helping with the food bank every Saturday morning. My husband coached 3 different youth teams and taught kids about making good choices when they got mad. I watched Hope playing at the park and made sure she knew about boundaries and speaking up when something felt wrong. We taught her that family means love, but also means holding people accountable when they hurt others. The psychiatrist called last month to say my sister was making slow progress, but would need years more treatment before any release. We listened to the update and thanked them for calling, but didn't visit or write back anymore. Our family learned to spot red flags we'd ignored before, like the little lies and the way she'd always played victim. We stopped making excuses for people's bad behavior and started calling things out when they didn't feel right. Mom joined a support group for parents of adult children with personality disorders and became their secretary after 6 months. She helped new members understand that mental illness doesn't excuse hurting innocent people or planning crimes. Dad wrote in his journal every night about forgiveness and boundaries and how to love someone from a distance. My brothers checked in weekly, and we all went to therapy separately to work through our own guilt and trauma. The extended family slowly came back together, but with new rules about money and trust and verification. Nobody gave cash gifts anymore, and everyone asked for receipts when someone needed help with expenses. Hope turned 3 last month and asked why she only had 1 aunt when her friends had more. We told her Aunt Sarah was sick and needed special doctors to help her get better. She accepted it the way kids do and went back to playing with her toys without asking more questions. Becca graduated with her social work degree and got hired full-time at the shelter, while Cade watched their daughter. They moved into a bigger apartment near the college and started saving for a house down payment. Lila and Ramon became like family to them and to us after everything they'd done to help. Our lives weren't perfect, but they were real and honest and free from the manipulation we'd lived with for so long. Thanks for sticking with me and wondering along all this time. It's definitely been a journey we've shared together. Until we meet again, take care. And if you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.